We got the big game on Sunday night, but before that, we got some big college basketball games. Welcome back, everyone, to Beef's Bet here on Fox Sports The Gambler, the Friday night college basketball weekend preview show. Coming back for our second week. Last week, Joe, pretty exciting week in college basketball. I cashed that Arkansas outright winner, and I believe you called out your UConn Huskies and said they had no chance to beat Marquette, and that was one of the more surprising results of the day, as UConn really from start to finish. I mean, I live bet Marquette a couple of times. I was like, I think they'll snap out of it. You look at the Duke game as well. Duke dominated from start to finish. Florida, I think it had their lowest point total ever, I believe was a stat, with 44 against Tennessee. So pretty wild week there in college basketball, our first weekend without football. Obviously, here in Philadelphia, we've been all geeked up about the Super Bowl all week. And I think kind of national media-wise as well, too, because this is one where it's like, I feel pretty confident saying these are the two best teams in the league, and you don't always get that in the Super Bowl. So it's cool to see that, and obviously cool to see Eagles potentially winning it again. But I'm eagled out. I'm Super Bowled out. I think I've done freaking 10 different videos this week on the Eagles. I think I've done like 10 videos on the Sixers trade deadline as well. So it's going to feel good to actually talk about some actual basketball, some actual games. But Joe, welcome back to the show. How are we? And ready for some hoops, and then obviously Super Bowl as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm locked in. I mean, massive weekend, with college basketball. Super Bowl, every year you have it circled. It's a holiday for us and just for sports fans in general. And even just like if you don't like sports, you still know about the Super Bowl. You still usually will go to a Super Bowl party, even if you don't watch the game. Like I'm always amazed at like there's that small group of people that like won't go to a Super Bowl party and then just won't watch the game. And I'm like, it's just a normal Sunday night for you. Like that's impossible for me to wrap my head around. But I mean, this is another, great weekend of college basketball. I do wish they had like a big ranked game on like 12 o'clock on Sunday to kind of just like get us, in the headspace for, like an awesome day of sports. But still fantastic games all throughout the weekend. Can't wait to dive into it.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure our show is going to be airing at 6. So if people are tuned in, they'll be tuned in just before what John Fanta, I believe, called the Big East game of the year. And that tips off on Friday night, Joe. You're coming down to the Philadelphia area this weekend to spend it with the fellas, but your UConn Huskies ranked number 19 at 16-6. They host number 12 St. John's at 20-3. 8 p.m. tip on Fox. As we said last week, for those who are new to the show, we use Haslam metrics to project the scores and the lines, just because DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever sportsbook you use doesn't have the lines out for these games yet on the weekend. But Haslam metrics is projecting super close. I don't even think defines it. Minuscule decimals projection for this one. They have UConn winning this one according to their analytic projection, 69.94 to 69.33. It literally as close as you can almost get. So we'll set the line we'll give it UConn -1.5, make it a little interesting there, and over under 137.5. Joe, can your Huskies defend home court and kind of ride that momentum? I don't think they've played at all this week, so they're a well-rested team after that Marquette game.
Yeah, this week was like their bye week, if you will. But massive game for UConn. St. John's is the best St. John's team of our lifetime, Coyle. Both of us born in 1999. I think, shout out John Fanta. He did say that was the first ranked, like top 15 ranked game for St. John's when they had Marquette since like 1999. Like, which is insane that it's been that long. St. John's my whole life has kind of been that team, even though I hate them, obviously, as a UConn fan, like I've always wanted to kind of get better because they kind of, are Big East basketball. Like when St. John's is having a good season, they're always talked about like this is, awesome to see them coming back up this year. And UConn, Coyle, you kind of said at the beginning of the show, very impressive win against Marquette, especially because the amount of turnovers they had, like it's just one of those games. If you looked at the box score but didn't see the actual score of the game, you would think that if UConn won, it was either going to be really, really close or they just lost outright. So that was a really impressive win for me. That was like a culture win. That was like a Dan Hurley has these guys. And, this game has the potential to be a turning point because this game against St. John's, and then Tuesday, UConn goes out to Omaha to play Creighton. Massive 3-game stretch of the season for them. But that being said, it is $2 beer night at Gamble Pavilion. I have UConn winning 65-62. Close game, tight game. So I'll take UConn -1.5. I'm going to go under 137.5. Feel like this is going to be a defensive slugfest. St. John's very good defensively. UConn at times, although Solo Ball is a monster, it just feels like at times they have a little bit of trouble kind of consistently staying in that offense. Like I was mentioning, the turnovers. But I think UConn's going to win a low-scoring game. I feel like this might be a game where both coaches get teed up. That's kind of my bold prediction. I could see Hurley getting teed up and then the crowd going nuts and him pumping up the crowd. But I think UConn wins a low-scoring game. McNeely returning for this one. And this is just a tough back-to-back games for St. John's. You win the biggest home game in years, before any of your players were alive. Now you have to go up to Gamble in a game where UConn's also kind of fiending for another big win after this Marquette game to launch them back into the top 15.
Yeah, perfect game to kick off the weekend. Like the perfect game that, you're getting back from work, you make dinner, you get your shower, and you're ready to have a couple drinks and go out to the bar. This is the perfect game to throw on while all that's going on. I'm going to go St. John's, actually, though, with this statement win. I think if St. John's really wants to be back, sitting here at 20-3, obviously a great year, awesome story under Rick Pitino. But if they really want to kind of anoint themselves into being back, you got to beat the champ, I think. And Marquette wasn't able to do that at home last week. I was all over Marquette last week. I said I felt that was kind of the statement game we talked about last year, how UConn blew Marquette out at UConn, and that was kind of their statement from then on. It was like, this is a team that nobody wants to F with. Like they're off to the races. I think if St. John's really wants to be kind of taken seriously and looked at as the potential winner here in the Big East, it's a game that they got to win, and you're going into a tough environment. I thought UConn would have benefited, like if this was their game from Tuesday night, kind of ride that momentum. Having the whole week off, I'm interested to see how they recover. But I'm going to go St. John's to go to UConn. Am I necessarily that confident that I'm actually going to place the bet? I'm not sure. But if you make me pick between these two teams, as we said with the projection, it's a literal coin flip. That's how close it is. I could see it going either way. I'm going to have it, though, come down to the wire and say St. John's pulls it out, 73-71. So I'll go St. John's plus 1.5, and I will go over 137.5 there. All right, we go to Saturday now. Body clock game here potentially, Joe, with Oregon at 16-7, traveling to Michigan State, who's ranked number 9 in the country at 18-4 on a bit of a slide right now, losing their last two. 12 o'clock tip on Fox. Michigan State projected at Haslam to win 76-68, so Michigan State minus 7.5, over under 143.5. And Joe, before you answer this and go into this game, how many $2 beer nights do they have at UConn? I feel like that's the second time you mentioned that this season.
So this is the first time I think they've done it twice in the same year. Because they did it earlier for Creighton, which they lost, actually.
Yeah, which they lost that game.
Yeah, but it's sponsored by Miller Lite does all the sponsoring for it. But my one friend who has season tickets to the games, they only sell the cans. And he says, if the gates open an hour before tip off, he's like, you can get there 10 minutes after the gates open sometimes, and they're gone because they don't have a limit. So you'll see students walking around with 10 beers at a time. It's crazy. It's just pure anarchy at Gamble Pavilion. And then there's just fistfights in the stands. It's awesome. It's just basketball. That's college basketball right there, folks. But back to this game, Coyle, both teams, Michigan State lost last two. Oregon on a 4-game skid here. They've been kind of in free fall lately. And, the fact that you have to go to Michigan State, I feel like I'm always going to take Izzo in a desperation spot. So I'll go with Sparty here, 74-71. I'll take Oregon to cover the 7.5. Feel like that's maybe a little bit too much points. Going to go with the over here, 143.5. Don't really like it. We'll definitely stay away from that on Saturday, but for the sake of making a pick, I will go with the over here.
Yeah, the Oregon's having a weird season in the regard of I feel like you would understand this. I'm not sure if many other people would, but they're going backwards in their process. I feel like they're a team that usually starts out slow,
yes,
and then they'll get hot towards the end of the year and be like, oh, you don't want to play this Oregon team in the tournament. This year they started out really hot, and they've been kind of falling apart as the season's going along. It's been a little bit of a weird kind of scenario there. Michigan State, the thing with them, they're ranked below, I think there's 363 Division I teams. They're below 330th in 3-point efficiency or 3-point percentage. They can't shoot the three ball at all. And I think that's been exposed potentially the past couple games. I like them to win this game at home. I think they're too good to drop 3 in a row. But I do think Oregon, in not a desperate mode, but Oregon and not a free fall, but Oregon's definitely on a slide as well. As I said, started really hot, was talked about as one of the potential top teams in the country, and they've fallen even out of the top 25. So I think Oregon gives them the best fight possible, but Michigan State pulls it outright. I'll go Michigan State 72, Oregon 68. So Oregon plus 7.5, under 143.5 there. Number 4, Tennessee at 19-4 at Oklahoma 16-6. This is another noon tip. This one's on ESPN. Haslam's given us Tennessee 69, Oklahoma 63. So we'll go Tennessee minus 5.5, over under 131.5. And this is giving me not PTSD, but flashbacks from when I was in New Orleans earlier this year for the Eagles Saints game. This was the college football game of the week, Tennessee versus Oklahoma. And now here we are, Super Bowl week, Eagles back in New Orleans. Little just side comment there. But, Joe, Oklahoma had a big-time blowout win over Vandy last week. Vandy's a team that is now on the bubble, in Tennessee, after a little bit of a slide. It's just so tough in the SEC. Like, you drop 2 in a row, you consider that a slide. But Tennessee sitting here at 19-4, looking to kind of get back on track. Had a nice win last night. Do you think that they go to Norman and beat Oklahoma in this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're going to get it done here. I got a final score of 67-62. So I'll take Oklahoma to cover the 5.5. I just feel like I'm going to be doing that a lot throughout the rest of the season when picking these SEC games, because it's going to be a massive game for Oklahoma. Definitely like the under in this game, but Oklahoma, a pretty solid team, but they're 3-6 in the SEC. I think they're they're 13th right now in the SEC, but Oklahoma could probably make the tournament. And, not to be the hypothetical SEC guy, but if you put them in other conferences, I feel like they'd have a much better record. But Tennessee, I said it last week, the way that they can just force you into playing their rock fight style of basketball is one thing that's very impressive to me. Coyle, we also kind of talked about not buying them to go to like the Final Four, but at least in terms of SEC regular season play, like they just suffocate you. And even if you beat them, it's you, like it's not often that you can force them out of their style of play. I think Oklahoma's going to struggle to do that even at home. So I'm going to go with Tennessee to win outright, but I'm going to take Oklahoma to cover the 5.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go Tennessee as well, and I'm going to take them to cover. I'm not as big of a fan of this Oklahoma team. As I said, it was a pretty impressive victory over Vanderbilt last week, but I'm just not buying into this team, man. And you kind of said it best with the style of play that Tennessee has. Like, they play the way that they want. 9 times out of 10, they'll dictate the pace, they'll dictate the game. And when you're playing an Oklahoma team that I think is a little bit more of like a free-flowing offensive team, they want to shoot a lot of threes. They want to kind of play that style. They have that motion-type offense. When you're a team like Tennessee and you play as physical as you do and you're as defensive-minded as you are, you can mess up the kind of flow of their offense. And I just feel like this is a bad kind of matchup here. So I'm going to go Tennessee to win, and I'm going to go Tennessee to cover 70-62. So Tennessee minus 5.5. And over 131.5 hitting there by the hook. All right, we go to the Big East now. We already talked about a huge game on Friday with St. John's and UConn. Now we go to Creighton, where Creighton has been really hot. Another team that started out slow, but starting to find their footing. They're at 17-6. They host number 11 Marquette, who's 18-5. Marquette, 2-game losing streak, just lost Saturday, obviously at home against UConn, and then Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden against St. John's. This is their second road game in a row, and they're looking to avoid a third straight loss. Creighton, even though they're not ranked, projected to win here 73-70. So we have Creighton minus 2.5, over under 142.5. Joe, you like Marquette to kind of get off the losing streak here and go to Creighton and get the win?
I do. I think Marquette's going to get this one done 75-72. And, I'm usually a big, if you can get a home team that's unranked favored over a ranked team on the road, I'll usually take the home team. That's been pretty profitable this year, except for tonight. I'm currently watching Maryland, Ohio State in my TV, and Maryland's just kicking the crap out of Ohio State. But that being said, I just don't see this Marquette team losing 3 straight. I mean, you had Creighton banking that crazy shot from the, corner against Nova last weekend. Creighton's 10-2, but I'm like not sold on them as like an elite team that should be like at the top of the Big East. I know they have great wins to support that. Like, they won at UConn. That, the win against Nova, like I just said, they're getting UConn coming to them on next week. They could win this game, but I'm just still not sold on Creighton. I think Marquette, a couple of weaknesses, as they're kind of being shown, but when you have a guy like Cam Jones, and we were talking about this the other night in our group chat, when you have someone like him who can take over a game if needed, and he's just so damn good, I will be comfortable taking Marquette in this spot. Like, I feel like he is someone that you can just kind of, he could put the backpack on and kind of get you across the finish line. So because of that, I think he's going to have a monster game, and I'm going with Marquette to win this game by 3 points. So I'll take him to cover the 2.5. I'm going to go over 142.5.
I'm gonna go Creighton. I've been high on them over these past few weeks. I think that they've handled their business. They've won the games they were supposed to win. We turned on Providence Creighton last night, and we were like, "Oh, I forgot we can't curse on here, but oh crap!" Like, it was the Providence Pinkout game. We should have bet them. Like, I feel like they always play really well in that spot. And Creighton still found a way to go win there, and I believe they covered. I think they won by almost 10 points at the end. Team battered by injuries at the beginning of the season, but they've really kind of figured it out. And this is a really, experienced Creighton team. Ryan Kalkbrenner, Stephen Ashworth, say what you want about them. They're both 40 years old, but they're experienced basketball players. And this is just, I think, a tough stretch for Marquette. You play arguably outside of your own team, the top other three teams in the conference in a row. It's just a little bit of a rough patch, but I think they're eventually going to get over it. Cam Jones, like you said, if there's one player in this matchup that could completely take it over, go to Creighton and win, it could be them. But Creighton, one of the best home court environments in all of college basketball. I think that they win this game. If it is a 2.5-point spread, it's going to be one of my favorite plays of the day. I think on Saturday, I'll take Creighton 74-70. Still a pretty close game at the end of the day, but I'm confident. Creighton gets it done. -2.5 over 142.5. All right, we go to the Big 12. Speaking of teams that are hot, if they win out, I don't think they'll make the tournament necessarily, at least regular season, but their resume will be an interesting piece of conversation. And that's Kansas State. They're 11-11, another team, a really slow start, but they've played really well over the past few weeks. Some big-time upsets, including going to Iowa State and winning last week. They host number 16 Kansas at 16-6. Kansas, a team hit or miss. What version of Kansas do you get? Kansas State, though, the Octagon of Doom, I think there's a legit chance for an upset here. 2 o'clock tip on ESPN. Kansas projected to win 73-67. So Kansas -5.5 over under 139.5.
Yeah, Coyle, I will say, you were kind of leading off to it. I think this team is the most dangerous team in the country that no one is talking about, because the amount of talent, we talked about it either last week or 2 weeks ago, like all that NIL money that they brought in for this roster. You got Coleman Hawkins, and you have Jerome Tang, who's a great coach. Like, Kansas State should be so much better than they actually are. Like, the fact that they're sitting here at 11-11 is crazy to me. I don't think anyone expected this coming into the season. And the one big thing, Coyle, that they have going for them, if you look at the rest of their schedule, this weekend you have Kansas. This upcoming week you get it's doing the thumbs up thing again. Why does it always do that when I put my thumbs up? Then you have Arizona and Iowa State, all ranked teams coming to you still. You have, and then besides in between those 3 games, you have a very workable schedule. It's going to be tough to overcome. They have a loss to Wichita State, a loss to Drake, and a loss to Liberty. Liberty's a decent, mid-major team that could win the CUSA, but Wichita State is bad. They're second to last in the American right now. That is a bad, bad, bad loss to have on your resume. If you're going to, make the NCAA tournament, you're going to probably have to win out, or if not, at least get close to it. Because that's the one thing about the Big 12. You're going to have so many good opportunities to bounce back. But I'm taking Kansas State to win this game 75-72, kind of like, things I was saying before. Like, you have all of this talent, and Kansas just hasn't looked right. I know they had a big win against Iowa State on Monday, but that was, I felt like, everyone kind of saw that one coming after, they've been struggling. But, the loss against Houston, I said last week, that's a loss that sticks with you. The loss against Baylor is another loss that's going to stick with you for a long time. And now you go on the road to Kansas State's biggest game of the season. I think it's just going to be a tough environment. I think Kansas State's going to walk out with a close win.
I'm going to take the Wildcats here as well at home. It's definitely my favorite gym name, I think. Yeah, I love the Palestra. I'll take that back. I love the Palestra in Philadelphia. Have we taken you there yet, Joe? Have you been in that building yet?
I have not been in the Palestra yet.
Wow. All right, so that's something that we will have to make happen eventually.
Maybe for a Yale
Um,
game about
but
that one.
but outside of the Palestra, the Octagon of Doom, where Kansas State plays, is by far my favorite gym name in the country. It's an awesome environment. Like it's one of those environments that you can like even feel like through the TV. You're like you can see how it's like impacting the game. And even though they're having a mid type season here, literally mid at 11-11, as average as it gets, that's still a game that everyone's going to show out for. You get the chance to take down Big Brother in Kansas. The students are going to show out for that one. This is a Kansas State money line play for me. Maybe I'll sprinkle on the spread, but it's one that I'm saying keep the points. Kansas State playing hot, playing with house money, and as you said, Kansas kind of reeling. Even in the games that they've won, haven't looked that great. They won this past week at home, but a big time collapse last week against Baylor. Another big time collapse the week before against Houston. Maybe Saturday is just not Kansas Day, and they need to just focus on their weeknight games and potentially the tournament. You get some luck there with Thursday, Friday. Maybe you can win your first tournament game. But Kansas State at home here. I'm going to take them outright. Keep the points, Vegas. Give me K-State 72-68. So Kansas State plus 5.5. It's going to be a money line play for me. Potentially even my dog of the day. And we're going to go with over 139.5 as well. All right, the SEC, two teams that, not high profile. I think Texas A&M had a little bit more buzz, no pun intended even there, but coming into the year, number 10 Texas A&M at 17-5. They traveled to number 15 Missouri 17-5. Definitely didn't have any buzz coming into the year. Had Tennessee on the ropes in the first half the other night. Tennessee then kind of takes command in the second half, but a 3:30 kick. I keep saying that. Excuse me. 3:30 tip on the SEC network. Mizzou projected to win 73-69. So we'll set it at Mizzou minus 3.5, over under 141.5.
Yeah, I've just been so impressed. I feel like we talk about it every week with this Missouri team, but I've been betting against them so much this season, and I've just been losing so much money. Like I bet against them, against Florida, they won on the road, and then they went to the state of Mississippi, swept that little 2 game stretch there. Went to Tennessee, I thought they were going to win that game. Tennessee looked like they were in a lot of trouble. You talk about a team. I was just saying that like forced Tennessee out of their comfort zone, and playing like rock fight style basketball. Um, but that was this Missouri team just continues to impress me after every single game. And I think they're going to win this one at home. I'm going with Mizzou 77, A&M 63. I think it's going to be a little bit low scoring, just kind of a gut feeling. Like I said, I'm not really good with predicting totals. I just kind of fire from the hip with those. But I'm going to go with Mizzou minus 3.5 here. They're such a fun team to watch. Like, especially to like when a team is good that you had no idea was going to be good in the preseason, and it's just like really cool to see this Missouri team back on the up and up when last year they were one of the worst power conference teams in the entire country.
Oh, sorry. You're cutting out on my end, but I think we're good. I think we're good now. I like Mizzou as well. Texas A&M is a team I talked about last week that I'm very high on. I think by far the most equipped Texas A&M team, and living up to kind of the hype and preseason expectations that they've had the past few years, following through with that. And it's kind of ironic that they're doing it in the most dominant SEC. And shout out to Eye on College Basketball podcast over at CBS, but with Norlander and Gary Parrish. But they refer to it on their show all the time as the most dominant conference in the history of college basketball this season, with how good the SEC's been from top to bottom. So shout out to Texas A&M for what they've been able to do, but also shout out to Mizzou for the way that they've bounced back from that year last year. Really have improved, obviously, year over year. Excuse me, and I think that this is a good spot for them. I really like Texas A&M, but just going on the road, I don't like to bet against these SEC home teams. So I'm going to go with Mizzou with the win and the cover. I'll go 80-70, Mizzou minus 3.5, over 141.5. I will say, if that does come out to be the total, that is something that's certainly highlighted on my card and will be one of my bigger plays of the weekend for sure. All right, we have what? 1, 2, 3. We got 4 games left. We got about 15 minutes left to hit on them, so we should be good there. I believe College Game Day is going here. Not 100% sure, but if I had to put money on it, it's probably the game that they're going to. Number 6, Florida, 19-3, travels to number 1, Auburn, who is 21-1, undefeated in the SEC. It's another thing that Parrish and Norlander always talk about, like, will Auburn, I mean, obviously the tournament dictates, but will they be one of the greatest teams ever in college basketball history if they go through this SEC undefeated and their only loss is at Duke, who's probably going to be a 1 seed in their own right? But Auburn's sitting here at 21-1, a 4 o'clock tip on ESPN. A lot of early games this weekend. Don't really like that. Auburn projected to win, though, 80-72. So Auburn minus 7.5, over under 151.5.
I will never forgive ESPN for this weekend because they booted this game to ESPN2 now because Luka's making his debut with the Lakers and they're putting that on ESPN. What do you have on ABC at this time on Saturdays? You don't put college basketball on there. Well, I don't know the NBA schedule, but like you can't boot Hawks Spurs over to like another network, but you got to put the Lakers just because Luke is making his debut. Don't get me wrong, that was an insane trade. Like that's a conversation for another day. But booting this, you have a top 6 matchup in core, like you said, one of the best years we've seen from a conference ever. You have fantastic teams. I mean, Florida has a legit chance to win the national title. Auburn, a legit chance to be a national champion. Auburn, a chance to be in the conversation with one of the best college basketball teams of all time. But bumping this game to ESPN2 is a travesty, But I digress. I'm going Auburn here,
You need a,
83-73.
you need a Kmetz TV rant every episode. That's the rule.
I mean, because there's always one a week where I'm like, this makes no sense. And then they'll complain about ratings and stuff being down. It's like, I have a way to fix it. But they don't care.
See, the thing with this schedule this weekend too, like we were talking earlier, we as so many people that are listening, I'm sure care, but we have plans Saturday, and we're not going out to meet people until like 6:30. So you can look at it from one regard. It's like, all right, all the pretty much good games of the day, or at least a lot of the good games are early. We'll be able to lock in. But then it's like when we're at the bar later. It's like, all right, Florida Auburn obviously is going to be on a TV probably like right when we're getting there. Duke Clemson then on the TV as well. But it's like the early part of the day is loaded up, I think. But once again, I digress.
I'll keep my pick quick. Real hard-hitting analysis with this game. But I'm going Auburn 83, Florida 73. I'll take Auburn minus 7.5. I can't bet against Auburn, especially at home right now. I mean, they look unstoppable. Like I said last week, Chani Broom is awesome. I think, like Cooper Flagg is probably going to get player of the year. But to do what Chani Broom is doing in the SEC against all of these teams is just so like, you have to take that into consideration. But I mean, I think he's the best player in the country right now. I'm going to go with Auburn here to win. I'm going to take him the cover. I'm going to go with the over in this game, 151.5.
Our deep dive analysis on probably the best game of the weekend, or at least of Saturday, was complaining about not many games being on when we're at the bar later. So that's what you get here. That's where you see our priorities are in line. But I'm going to go Auburn as well. I'm not like completely out. Like I'm not saying like, oh, Florida, if they're a 2 seed or a 3 seed, they're going to get bounced in the first round. I'm not saying that, but I don't think this is like a Final Four team. I think they're good, and it's kind of ironic as well. Like we always talk about year over year how guard play matters most in the tournament. Florida's got good guard play, but I'm just not fully bought into this team as an elite team. Sure, I think they're a good team. Sure, I think they can make it to the second weekend, but I could also seeing them be like a 2 or a 3 seed that gets bounced in the round of 32. I'm not fully bought in on this team. Auburn is dominant. Auburn, I think, as well with the home court. They're one of the teams that I was talking about, like with Kansas State. Like when the home court is rocking in that building, you can almost feel it through the TV and feel kind of the momentum swinging on the pendulum. And that's why I love Auburn so much on the spot, because I think Florida can surely hang around. But all it takes is like one block, one leak out, one dunk, followed up with a pull-up transition 3, and you're off to the races if you're Auburn. I think Auburn's going to win this one. I think we get a close kind of first half, see Florida battle there, but Auburn pulls away and covers in the second half, 83-70. So Auburn minus 7.5 over 51.5. All right, we go to the ACC now. Number 2 Duke at 20-2 travels down to South Carolina to play 18-5 Clemson. A 6:00 tip on ESPN. Duke projected to win 70-61. Duke 8.5 over under 130.5. Obviously, big story here with Duke playing primetime Saturday night game. You're always going to get a lot of eyeballs on it, but a bigger kind of more meaningful story off the court. Dick Vitale makes his return, I believe, over 2 years, he said, since he's last called a college basketball game. Has had a pretty tough battle with cancer over the past few years, but all he's wanted to do, and he keeps kicking along, keeps plugging along, is get back to call some college basketball. And it fits perfectly that it happens to be a Duke game that they put him on first. So great to see Dickie V back. It's going to be cool to hear him. And like I said, if we're at the bar, I honestly might go to the bathroom and put it on Watch ESPN just to hear him for a couple of possessions, just for old time's sake. But Joe, thoughts on Duke Clemson this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it is fantastic. Dickie V is back. I'm very excited for that. Coyle, I'm with you. I mean, we grew up like our entire lives. Like he was like the one consistent, like, hey, big game in college basketball, Dickie V's calling the game. Like you knew that was going to be the biggest game of the weekend. So it is awesome to see him back and be able to hear his voice again. But coming to this game, I mean, I had this whole speech prepared. I texted to you, Coyle, about how I thought Clemson was the most disrespected team in the country. You're sitting there at number 2 in the ACC, albeit a very down ACC, but you're sitting there number 2 in the ACC. Coming into the week, you're 18-4, and you're the first team out of the top 25. You're sitting there at 26. Then they go out and they lose to Georgia Tech, and I'm like, of course. Clemson, tough loss at home, but you're sitting there at 10-2 in the ACC. You're second place in the ACC. And there's people talking about him like getting a 9 or 10 seed. It's just insane. Years past, if you had that record in the ACC, you were talking about, getting a 2, maybe a 3 seed. But it's just crazy to see how soft the ACC's gotten this year. That being said, I am going with Clemson to pull off the upset. Dickie V's first game back. I am definitely taking Clemson to cover. I think it will be a close game. And the one big thing for me is like reasoning wise, Duke hasn't really been tested since they played Auburn. Like the one game where it was kind of a sweat for a little while in terms of, a team could have really won was at Wake Forest. They smoked North Carolina last week. They just embarrassed the shell of what once was Syracuse basketball. And you kill NC State, another rivalry game. Like they haven't really been tested in a long time. I think Clemson is, the best team left on their schedule in the ACC because they do have a game against Illinois in a couple weeks at the Garden. But besides this game and maybe at North Carolina, I think Duke is going to be able to run the table. Like those are the only 2 games that really jump out as like, with like the flashing, like alarm bells that they could lose. But I don't know. I think, they're going to lose this game. I just think they haven't been tested. It's nothing against them. We've seen the great teams in years past slip up and lose a game. And like I said, it's not like Clemson is a mid-major. They are the second best team in the ACC right now, getting to host, Duke after a kind of an embarrassing loss against Georgia Tech, to be frank, the other night. I feel like this is a, game that they've had circled all season long. I feel like it's going to be a very raucous environment, and I think Clemson's going to be able to win. I'm calling like a game winner, either a crazy 3 or, like a floater that bounces around on the rim at the horn. And we're going to hear Dickie V, I can't do impressions, but he'll start freaking out. They'll rush the court. I think it's going to be, a great moment.
Yeah, you've always been a night owl, but you're a bit of a sicko for still being up on 12:18 on a work night. I woke up at like 3 a.m. and I saw that. I thought it was like something bad happened, someone died or something. And I see a text from you, and it's just a paragraph about Clemson. And I'm like, all right, I can text this back in the morning, but I've gone like grandpa mode. Like I'm asleep on weeknights by 10 o'clock. Maybe tonight I'll stay up a little bit later, enjoy myself a little bit, but I'm just beat after these days. And I wake up to that text from you. I'm like, geez, dude, it's just Clemson basketball we're talking about. Calm down here. But I'm going to go with Clemson as well. I'm going to go with the upset. I think Duke is good. I think that they've been proving it week after week. Obviously the big red flag with them once again, I'm not trying to do these, but those are good ones. Red Flag, Cooper Flag, and Texas A&M and Buzz with Buzz Williams. But is just a lack of competition that they've played, and even like last week against UNC, that they dominated that game. That I think the final margin was 17, but that was a game that was never close. Ken Duke, once they get to the tournament, start playing closer games. Are they going to be used to that just because of the lack of competition they played? But this is, Clemson Super Bowl. You always say these type of things, Joe, like when freaking Texas Tech hosts Kansas, or, Villanova, or not Villanova, but you know what I mean? Like when these kind of mid-tier programs in the conference have the chance to host the Alpha, the premier team, they show up and they show out. And that's college sports kind of in a nutshell there. Clemson, too, is one of those environments in college basketball, like since I've been little, like when Clemson basketball has been good and they've had good home crowds, it's been one of the funner environments to even just watch on TV. And I think sitting here at 18-5, definitely going back to the tournament, Super Bowl type of game for them. They win this game. I think even after the Georgia Tech loss, they'll be finding themselves in the top 25. Duke, I think, is really good, but I also don't think it's good enough to kind of run the table. Maybe a loss here, kind of a slice of humble pie, is good for them. I'm going to go Clemson to win it outright, 74-70. So Clemson plus 8.5, over 130.5 there. All right, we got about 4 minutes left, so quick hitters here for our SEC game and then a Big 12 game. Number 3, Alabama at 19-3 at Arkansas, who's playing really good basketball, 14-8. 8 o'clock tip on ESPN. Alabama 83-79 is a projection, so we'll go Bama minus 3.5, over under 161.5.
Yeah, I'm going Arkansas here, 89-87. Things could be a very high-scoring game, track meet. That's what Bama likes to do. I'm going to take Arkansas plus 3.5, over 161.5. That's a big turning point. We were talking about it earlier with UConn winning at Marquette. Like, that's the kind of win that can completely turn your season. Coach Cal going into Kentucky in that massive game, winning on the road, then they go and win at Texas. Now you get Bama at home. You've completely rejuvenated the fan base. I guarantee you Bud Walton is going to be sold out. It's going to be a packed crowd. You have the number 3 team in the country coming to town. After that skid they had to start, the SEC, slate where they went 0-5, you're now sitting there at 3-6 in the SEC. And the beauty of the SEC is you have so many more jam-packed games left on your schedule. You can maybe go 500 the rest of the way and still have an incredible resume, especially if you look at some of these teams on the bubble right now. I feel like we say this every year about the bubble being like weak, but the bubble is not, very exciting this year. And I think Arkansas
in the tournament.
We can't expand the tournament. That's I could do a whole, hour-long show just on not to expand the tournament. But I think Arkansas is going to win this game. And there's something psychological about like that game. For everyone who's played sports at any level, you win a big game that, you might not, you aren't supposed to win, or you were down big and came back and you pulled off this big win, and it kind of launches you forward for the rest of your season. And I think we're seeing that with Arkansas here.
Yeah, and especially in a season that they've underperformed. Like, this was a top 20 team coming into the season, and they got it off to a really slow start. Like, they're sitting here at 3-6 on the conference, and they're floating around the bubble, but plenty of opportunities, whether it's the rest of the regular season, which pretty surprisingly, I think is only like 6-7 games left for these teams. But then you also get, ample opportunities in the SEC tournament to make some noise as well. I'm going to go with Arkansas as well. Cashed in on them on the money line last week, I think at plus 425 and the spread. So that was a favorable game for me from the Razorbacks. I'm going to run it back with them, trust them again this week. And, 8 o'clock primetime game at the bar. That's the one that I feel like everyone's like, oh yeah, like we'll all ride with Arkansas with you. So Arkansas 82, Alabama 80, Arkansas plus 3.5, over 161.5. I've said multiple times how big of a fan I am of Alabama, but kind of in the same scenario as Duke. Like, you got the big dog right now in the conference kind of coming back to your building. Arkansas, as we said, riding momentum, 2 big big road wins in a season that was looking at as kind of a lost season, and now you're right back in the tournament picture with plenty of talent and plenty of momentum to go forward. So Arkansas outright can keep the points, but I like the plus 3.5 and over 161.5. And our final game, a minute each, Joe. 13 Texas Tech, 18-4 at number 20 Arizona, playing some really good ball as well, 16-6. 10 o'clock tip on ESPN. Haslam's got a 75-72 win for Arizona. So we'll go Arizona minus 2.5, over under 147.5.
I'm going with Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, 71-68, going on the road and pulling off this upset based, on the spread. But Texas Tech just proved to me last week they're not scared of going into anyone's house. They walked into Houston and won that game. So I'm going with Texas Tech here, quick hitter. I'll take them plus 2.5. I'm going to go under 147.5.
Yeah, I really like this Texas Tech team. I'm definitely buying into them. I think they could be an Elite Eight type of squad. But Arizona kind of in the same position as Arkansas. Like Arizona won that game that they shouldn't have against Iowa State on the full court heave from Caleb Love, and they've been riding the coattails of that and the momentum. Like that's a big thing with those big wins. You can't squander that momentum. You really got to kind of capture it in the bottle and use it as much as you can. I think Arizona's doing that. I think they've been playing really well over the past couple of weeks since that happened. So I'm going to take Arizona to win here outright, or they're the favorite. So I'll just take them to win 78-72. I'll take them to cover minus 2.5 as well, over 147.5. I really like that play. Texas Tech, compared to years past, this Texas Tech version has been a team that's been able to score a lot more. So I like the over in that game as well. But Joe, that'll do it for us on Beef's Bets episode 2 here on Fox Sports The Gambler. Quick hitter before you get out. Super Bowl Sunday. Who is winning this game, Eagles or the Chiefs?
I'm so sorry to the city of Philadelphia, but I cannot bet against Patrick Mahomes. I'm going with the Chiefs. I'm going to take the over. Exact score prediction, I'm going to go 33-29. No, 33-27. 33-27. Kelsey walk-off touchdown in overtime. He proposes on the field.
That's disgusting. All right,
and the city burns to ground.
I'm ending this stream. We will talk to you next week.